Alright, welcome to the next episode of the Sports World with Patrik. Today, we're talking, we've been across the sea for the last 2 weeks, and we're sort of staying across the sea for a while, probably till the end of this month. Sort of just covering everything on that side before we come back into the United States. Of course, and in North America particularly. Of course, we're talking about the Germans Women's Hockey League, which is the DFEL. As mentioned before, of course, the DFEL, of course, has its competitors like the SDHL and the EWHL, which we talked about in the last episode. Of course, this was an amateur league that was founded by the German Ice Hockey Federation. Of course, it's also sponsored by the IHF, sort of in a way to make sure that we still have leagues to be in. Of course, this has been a pretty interesting league to follow along with. Of course, with Germany, of course, as we've talked about, the PWHL, the EWHL, the SDHL, the DFEL. It's it'll be very interesting to see if, of course, like with all the other leagues, the concern is that with the PWHL growing and players moving across the sea, possibly that the league will get watered down. Now, that could be very much possible, depending on how much these teams decide that they will be leaving for. Of course, in the FEL, there are 7 teams total, with 6 of them being in Germany, 1 in the Netherlands, and of course, this is sort of like how we saw with the last few leagues. Of course, this is sort of women's leagues. Besides the SDHL, this is sort of across multiple different countries, of course, to ensure there's enough teams for the league. Of course, there have been quite a few different ways of doing stuff. Of course, they did have 2 divisions at one point in this league, and of course, it did have the North and the South. And they did eliminate that after the 05-06 season, started playing in the 1 division with the 06-07 season. Now there have been a few teams that have sort of withdrawn and sort of played on their own, including the Dufendoro EG, who withdrew from the DFEL just before the 2022-2023 season. Of course, they were playing at the time with 6 teams, so they did sort of bring on some more teams. Of course, they do have a playoff, and the playoff starts with 4 teams. For the regular season, from the regular season, are in the playoffs, and then of course the bottom 2, sort of how the PWHL did their inaugural playoff season, where not all 6 teams, but 4 teams at least made it. Of course, now with 7 teams, you do have 3 teams that are eliminated before the season is over. So let me give you who all is in this. So in the DFEL, of course, you have the Amsterdam Tigers, the only Netherlands team in the league, playing out of Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. Of course, their home venue is the Jaap Eden Hall. They were, of course, more recently brought in from their local leagues, sort of the increased in the amount of numbers of players, or not players, but teams that were in here. Now, of course, the next team would be the EC Bergkammern Baron. They play out of Bergkammern, Germany. Sorry. Their home venue is the Esaporlotte Bergkamen. Next is the Esenbaren Juniors Berlin, playing out of Berlin, Germany. Playing in their home venue of Velbech Plus. Next is the ERC Ingolstadt, playing out of Ingolstadt, Germany, playing out of the Saturn Arena. Next is the Mad Dogs Mannheim, playing out of Mannheim, Germany. It's playing out of the SAP Arena. Then is the ECDC Memmingen, playing out of Memmingen, Germany. Playing at the A Sporthalle Memmingen. Next is the ESC Plagen Mall, playing out of Plagen, Germany, playing out of their home venue of Essetstalen Menenbach. Of course, all these teams that are here, of course, they have their local teams. Of course, for German teams, the travel is a lot easier compared to that of the Netherlands team. Of course, the Netherlands, they have to sort of travel to Germany to play, and of course, they all play for the DFEL Cup, and of course, sort of created with the EWHL. They do have since they are competitors, they do have a cup that all of them play for, that the IHF has created, which is the EWHL Cup. And of course, the German teams are playing for that also. So, of course, they all compete with each other in there, and of course, on top of competing for the DFEL Cup, of course, they do play for the Germans Women's Cup, and of course, they do have a champion and a finalist for that. The tournament, of course, has not been held for a while now, so they haven't really played for it in a while. Of course, the EWHL the Super Cup sort of took over for that, and of course, the championship that they do have for it. Now, one very interesting thing, of course, when we talked about the SDHL and we talked about the PWHL. Well, not so much with the PWHL, but we talked about different leagues in Europe with hockey, particularly. And they all sort of had a league that you would go further down into. And something interesting with the EWHL was that they didn't really have a league that you would get demoted down to or relegated to if you weren't in the top of it. Whereas with the DFEL, they do have a league that you can get sort of relegated to, and we saw this with the SDHL. Hopefully, we will see it eventually with the EWHL of of course, the European Women's Hockey League. But of course, it's just time. You have to give it sort of time, and with the concerns that eventually, as the PWHL in North America gets very popular, that the DFEL will end up, along with the SHL, sort of getting watered down because you'll have players wanting to go play there instead of playing here. It'll be interesting to see what they do. Unlike with the DFEL or unlike with the SDHL, neither the EWHL or the DFEL sort of offer that body checking. Of course, that's something that they're sort of testing out there in Sweden with the leagues there. Of course, that's sort of just to be a way of testing all of the rules and seeing what they can do to make the sport more interesting. Of course, everybody's looking to make the sport more interesting of hockey. Of course, everybody Since fighting has sort of slowed down in the sport itself, they've sort of been looking at new ways to get the crowd involved and everything. Of course, uh, it'll be interesting to see. Like I said, now with this controlled by the German Ice Hockey Federation, and the EWHL was controlled by the Hungarian Ice Hockey Federation. It'll be interesting to see if over time they sort of do how the PWHL is and just have their own league office rather than having the hockey federations over there run these leagues. So that will be all for this episode. Of course, we will be talking. So let me give you sort of a view of what we're talking about next. We'll be talking about the Ice Hockey League. This is, of course, the European teams over in Europe, and we'll talk about in the very interesting part. Of course, this is part of that team, or this is part of the IHF's goal, and of course has different leagues. Of course, is a relatively old league, of course, but it does have some relations to what we were talking about last week with the Champions Hockey League. So, thank you.